reasons I came out here real early today. And I'm out here before the chickens are up. You can see the flag isn't even moving yet, which means I may get 1 or 2 good flights before the day ends. Anyway, what I want to do, I'm using the last little bit of my Taffender fuel up. And this is PowerMaster fuel. This was recommended to me by George Aldrich, made by Don Nix, and it's available. I'm going to put all the information later on in the video, but right now it's really, I hope, going to be a flyable day, that we can do some legitimate testing here. It's about 40 degrees and the sun isn't up yet, so let's get out there and see how the fuel runs. Now, to do a valid test, something that's really a blind test, one of the things I always do, I always like to start with a square one now. And by the way, I want to thank Doug Taffender for many years of supplying us with real good high quality fuel. I know he's retired. He's sold part of the business to John Brodak, and I'm sure John will keep that part of the business alive and well. But as of today, we have no good supplier of fuel. And we hope that starting today, Don Nix at PowerMaster is going to take the place of the fuel that is no longer in production. We have a few gallons that just left. You can see we burned 22 of these in Georgia, well, maybe 21 and a quarter. But we're going to start right now. What I want to do is I want to get a square one flight, make sure the needle sets at 10.5 and I get an accurate time length of run. I want to make sure I have my square one that I'm very comfortable with and what has served us well. We have a 280 Venturi, 3 head gaskets in the motor, GMA 3-bladed prop. Then when I switch to this fuel, what I want to see is, does the RPM go up and down? Does the needle setting go up and down? Does the length of run go up and down? And those will all be significant things. It isn't a test of, is this fuel better than this fuel? Is this fuel better? Because we can change the characteristics of the fuel just by upping and lowering the nitro and oil contents. But what I want to know is that this is the fuel that's worked well for us. For instance, if this fuel runs a lot longer, I'll want to order a higher nitro content. If this fuel runs a lot shorter, longer, is the motor going to run the same? Is the brake going to be the same? And the only way to do this is by coming out on a given day, and it looks like we're going to have a little bit of air this morning. And a lot of people, they tell you they did the test, but they're not out here doing the test. And the only way I know how to do these things, and you can see I have a box, I even have another pipe to try today. The only way to do these tests is to run them back and back in the same motor in the same day, the only way that I know of that's valid. And then, if we need to adjust the nitro content up or down, the oil content up and down, I'm sure we'll be able to deal with Don. And because I want to buy the fuel in big quantities and distribute it on, at least at our club level, if not the local contest level, it's one of the things I believe in. If I'm going to sell something, I like to be using it. I don't like to sell something and you turn around and I'm not even using it. So we're going to try to work with Don. We're going to try to work, of course, with George and get this whole package working as well as we can by the time the real flying season comes around. Now, as I always do, and it's very important if you want to make a very valid test of anything, because a lot of people, and to be perfectly honest, a lot of people say they've tested things that they don't test. They get information third or fourth hand. Well, my friend out in Podunk, Iowa, he tested it and he said that prop is no good, that fuel is no good, that glow plug's no good. And anybody that knows me long enough knows I would rather, I guess, I definitely would like to try it myself. Now, it's cold out here. The radio said 40 degrees. My little thermometer says 39. I don't know who's right. But I always start with a square one. Square one, hopefully, is where we were the last time we flew. Now, by looking in my notes, the last time we flew, it was 3 degrees colder than it is now. So I can expect possibly when I start the motor up, it's going to be running a little lean and have to open the needle a click or two a little bit anyway. But very important, it's pointless to me anyway to do a test that on one day it's blazing hot, 90 degrees, the next day it's 30. Well, in this case, one day it's 37, one day it's 40. It's not much of a change, but the first flight of the day, I want to get the motor needled back to 10.5, make sure it's in the motor run part of it. I have my good stopwatch. I want to get an accurate time of the length of run of the motor, because that's going to be our square one for the rest of the day. Without that square one, everything else is just a stab in the dark. And we know, for instance, in the last 20 gallons of fuel, we have very predictable lap times, very predictable flight times. Changes like head gaskets have been very predictable in the power output and in the characteristics of the motor. So I hope by being able to test these two fuels back and forth, I can at least, the minimum, replicate what I've previously had, and in even a better situation, be able to improve on it in some way. the reason I left those last 10 laps on, because one of the ways you can keep track of your mileage, because I'm running around with the camera, I always add in 2 or 3 laps, 5 laps, or whatever, but you know, I always want to make sure I'm not running out of fuel right at the end of the flight. Now, it seems like I'm getting plenty of mileage. This is the last of the Taffender flights. I took 3 flights altogether, took a mean average, went in on the needle just a little bit on the 3rd flight. It went up 3 degrees. We're still launching at 10.5. Now, when I put the Power Blast fuel in, I want to get one of the things I want to see is where the needle is set. That's going to be a big indicator of which way this is going to go. But we're basically done with the Taffender fuel now. Okay, now to step 1, I want to be as fair as possible about the test to myself, to George. People who depend on me to go out here and get my knuckles turned into raw meat. First thing I want to notice, take a gallon of fuel, and this is what I always, doesn't matter what brand it is, shake it up. Okay, you see the foam on top of the fuel? Well, normally the first thing I would do is add 2 squirts of Armor All. That's a big art trick, and it works perfectly. I'm not going to do that to this gallon because I want to test it in its virgin state. But if I can, maybe halfway through the gallon, I'll put 1 squirt of Armor All in here. It gets rid of the foam, and usually what that does, it stabilizes the run somewhat. Now, Doug's fuel, by the way, came exactly the same way, so don't think, you know, as good of a friend as Doug and I were, see, no foam. He already has the Armor All, and the trick is, but I don't want to test altered fuel. Don Nix mixed this fuel. He may want to add Armor All to fuel. Some ingredient, there's probably one little tiny ingredient in there that does it, but to get out here and test it and be perfectly fair, I want to use it exactly as it comes from Don Nix for the first couple of runs and see if I run into anything. Now remember, the key thing to keep in mind with all fuel, and I mean this is such a terrible misunderstanding a lot of people have. One of the things we're not looking for in the fuel that we use in this event, we're not looking for total overall power as the #1 requirement. If that were the case, if we were in carrier event, a speed event, pylon event, overall power is the criteria. In stunt, there's a lot of different criteria. Engine run character is one of them. Keeping the engine running at a cool enough temperature that it shuts off coming downhill is certainly a characteristic that we're looking for. Long engine life. Having the right amount of oil in the fuel. Now you can tell right off the bat, PowerMaster fuel looks like it has either no clots or a different chemical ingredient, or it's all castor. I haven't talked to Don about this since this just came yesterday, and I was anxious to get out and use it. But it doesn't matter. This will be a good test. And what we're going to try to do over the weekend, I've asked 4 or 5 people, Larry Scorinzi for one, to bring up their motors that they know have a very solid run character, like Mike Kajeski's Tiger 60 is totally predictable. We can tell within 1 click of exactly where it should be, so that we can get a wide range of motors on this test. Not only the Jet 50, get some Fox 35s, get some all of the motors that people would be prone to use in this event. Rich Peabody's PA51, that's one of the ones we want to test. That's a motor that's very common in this event. But one of the things is always keep in mind, especially in cold weather, the last thing I'm looking for is more power, more power, more power. What I want is that nice character where the motor shuts off, comes on, shuts off, coming downhill, goes lean at the top of the vertical 8 and the top of the overhead. That character is worth so much in terms of, I call it pilot workload. When you don't have a motor on, yeah, you could still fly, but the pilot workload goes up. It's like not having a throttle pedal in the car. Yeah, you could still drive, you shut the key on and off. Or old Fokker D7s, they had no throttle, they just shut the ignition off to land. They blipped the ignition. The purpose of this, the purpose of the fuel test, is to make it as easy as possible. And again, one of the things we're not trying for more power. If you want more power, take head gaskets out of the motor, run 40% nitro and make a 10-ounce tank. That's not what we're looking for at all. What we're looking for are those nice characteristics that come when the engine is running in its right temperature range, it's not running under too much of a load, and it's not overcompressed. When all of those things come together, you have a very friendly package that anybody can use to help them do a stunt pattern. When you don't have a motor run, the loop, you get here and the motor is just flying out. You look at anybody without a motor run, they turn into eggs. A round loop you almost have to have a motor run for to have it right. On the fuel. first flight we took, and certainly we're getting the mileage we need. You really can't get it into the seconds because it takes time to move the camera into position, and that would always give you 3, maybe 5 more laps, I don't know, but it was certainly not running out of fuel even with moving the camera. Okay, my initial impression is the needle didn't change a whole lot. It feels like this fuel might be a little more potent and powerful. It felt like the plane at a 10.5 launch was running a little bit faster. Maybe, maybe not, because I averaged the 3 Taffender flights, so what I'm going to do is take 2 more on this and then average them out. And by having some of these on video, I can average them out. Now, if I was in a position where, let's just make a pretend thing up. Right now, if it was running out of fuel, I'd really have to either add a head gasket or get a smaller Venturi. Remember, this is a 280 spigot Venturi, so relatively large Venturi, uses a lot of fuel, but we have a whole bunch of Venturis now in inventory, so we're basically, from this point on, going to be dialing into using this fuel. One way or another, there is no more Taffender fuel. Now, the only thing that I could think that might be something that I'd want to change, and it's very easy, and I've had to do it, by the way, to every other brand of fuel I've used, is add a little bit of that anti-foaming agent. That's a very old trick, believe me, especially if you have a profile. But I want to take one more flight on this. That'll make 3 flights, then I can average them. I never want to take one flight. I like to average them. Then what I want to use, I want to try my braided lines, because that loads the plane a lot more, and see if I get into a situation where I'm a little weak on power. Usually I'm on the other end of this. I'm on the other end where I'm trying to slow the plane down all the time. Anyway, we will find out. It looks like, well, looks like we're getting some nice flights in before anybody shows up. Because what happens, as soon as other people are here, there's background noise, engine noise. And it kind of invalidates the thing when you can't hear the motor on. Anyway, I'm sure we'll maximize the amount we can use. Now, this is the last flight I'm going to take before putting in the armor roll. I still have the fuel, and it feels like, it may be my imagination, it feels like you could go back on the video. That's what's nice about the video. And the last 2 or 3 maneuvers, when it's using up the last of the fuel, you can hear and there's no apparent reason it's doing that. Maybe it'll get better, maybe it won't. Maybe it's the engine or something else, but I know the anti-foaming agent always seems to work well. Still getting just those little inconsistent, I don't even know how to describe it. Not something an average person would even notice, but it's one of the things I noted, putting a little bit of the armor roll in the fuel cure, so what's the point of not doing it? We've had enough flights on this now, and it's running very well, and maybe we can make it even a little bit better. Okay, it's definitely no problem that we're not going to be able to use this fuel for one reason or another, but again, if you haven't seen this, and you're having little Mickey Mouse engine problems, especially if it's inconsistent. I don't know in the real world. There's a chemical in here that's a surface tension killer. Probably Don Nix already knows about it, but one of the things that many of the stunt flyers that I know have gotten accustomed to is 2 squirts of armor roll. Doesn't seem to matter if you put 1 or 3 either, it's not critical. It's just a surface tension killer, is all it is. Now you shake it up all you want. And put that back into there. No foam. Now I just think that'll add a little consistency to the rest of our test. See, and even a little inconsistent thing like that, I really don't want to have in the test, because it seems like, number one, we definitely have a relatively equal run time. It's only off by 1 or 2 laps either way as I go about this. The other thing that's really worthwhile here is you can just call up and get the fuel delivered, either UPS or shipment of your choice, where I know in the past other fuels have been hard to get, and the last year it's been impossible to get taffeta fuel, the last 8 months or so. And that's a real problem for some people. So the biggest single thing with the fuel is that they don't leave out the oil. And if you look at, first thing I did was look at the back of the plane from the pipe to the tail wheel after the first flight, and it's got oil in it. That's my chief concern, that there isn't. The nitro you can up and down and play with, and actually sometimes it'll run better with a little less nitro, but when the oil isn't in the fuel, oh my, especially in hot weather. In this cold weather it probably wouldn't make a whole lot of difference, but in hot weather, jeez. And I won't mention any names. There are some brands of RC fuel that I've bought that, holy mackerel. I mean, you had to go in a half a turn on a needle. The motor ran 15 minutes. You knew there was no nitro in the fuel. Just unbelievable that they sell stuff like that. And RC people don't seem to mind it at all, by the way. Now, one of my square one tests, I always have a set of 018 lines, and you can see they're not solids. Now, I always try to use solids at the gnats, of course. On runway air, they always seem to have some advantage. The problem at our field is you can see these little brown things. They catch on the lines, chew the lines up. You're constantly making new lines. It gets kind of annoying. But one of the things I wanted to do, if I put on the braided lines in the plane, all of a sudden it's getting soft all over the place, I know I'm weak on power because the lines are a tremendous drag on the whole system. And I know the opposite happens when I use 014s. If I'm very, very weak on power and put the 018s on, the plane will get very soft up top above 45 degrees. And no matter how you retrim the plane, you still have to drag these lines around. So one of the tests is, and of course I always have the 018 braided lines, because if the humidity conditions come around or you go to a contest and it rains, you need to be able to pull a set of 018 lines. So the next part of this test is I want to run a flight, just an ordinary flight, the same setting, a 10.5 launch, and get some idea of how much I'm putting a strain on this system. It shouldn't be any problem. I've done this test with other fuels many times. And usually it'll mean I just need to go up 100 or 200 RPM. But being I'm at 10.5 right now and I'm in the motor run area of the flight, I'd like to be able to know that when I put the 018s on, I can just say go to 10.6 instead of 10.5. And if I need a little more power, one of the things I can always do is change the air filter from green to black, from black to no air filter. That's one of the nice things about being able to fine-tune right at the field. A part of the country where rain isn't a factor, but in New England, some of the contests we have, and just some of them down here, it's always either very humid or very humid in the morning. You come out and the grass is soaking wet, you know you can't use your solid lines. And then the obvious question is, gee whiz, why not just use braided all the time? Because there's definitely in my estimation, a tremendous trim handicap to using the braided 018 lines. And so now that we're trying to really fine tune, I mean now we're getting down to shaving hairs. We know this fuel is going to be able to replace taffeta fuel with no problem at all. But now I want to see if it'll pull the 018s without sagging or bogging down or anything. Well, I know I'm closing in on having something that's going to be real good for my setup. And as we test other planes, Kajeski's and Scarinzi's and Tom Hampshire stuff, we'll know more and more and more about the fuel. Now, let's say, for instance, gee whiz, it won't pull the 018s. One of the easiest things to do is instead of using 5% nitro, we'll order up a case of 7 or 10. Or we can just order some nitro, period. Spike the fuel a couple ounces to get back to where we want to be with this program that we're running here. Now, up until the fuel change, you know, I had no idea that we were not going to ever be able to get taffeta fuel. So a lot of times when you lose one supplier, you find a supplier out of necessity that's even better or just as good or better than the original one. And I don't want to compare things like that. I never want to be a person who compares and says, this is better than that, therefore this one is terrible. No, they're both good. But what we want to try to do is in our setup here, one of the things we can try later, we can try the air filter trick, we can try the compression trick, we can try up and down pitching props, we still have the BY&O. But if you're not willing to come out here and burn the fuel, then you're just guessing. And the worst of all is when you pass on information that you've heard through the grapevine and you don't even know if it's true. The run times are almost identical. One of the things, the lap time on that the first time we flew this, the lap time felt a little fast, and I was concerned. I said, ooh, gonna have to make a major adjustment here. But after dialing this in a few times, and I think possibly one of the things that might have been invalid about the first test, there might have still been an ounce of fuel in the filter or in the pump itself. So I'll kind of invalidate that first flight as we go on the day, get a couple more that I can go home, and then the answer is to average it. As long as I know all the launchers are in the 10.5 range, 100 RPM up or down isn't really significant. And I know as an example that this prop always loaded the motor, had just put a load on the motor that was the highest of any of the props. And I know as a typical example, if I wanted to, I could just change the prop. But because I had this dialed into what I was very happy with the last day that we flew this, and I'm real happy with that big Spigot Venturi. That's one of the things. I sent George 5 other Venturis from that set that Andy made, and I hope right now, for instance, if I was running short on fuel, it's a 5-minute job to change the Venturi. But it's also easier. We still want to do a little head gasket test, go up and down on compression, see how that relates to it. A lot of testing, and it looks like the air might even hold up today. We might even get a couple hours into the sunny part of the day. We have no trouble whatsoever pulling the 018, so we can put those away. Test done. I also took a flight. I just took the air filter right off to see, and what happens is it makes a dramatic drop in mileage having the filter off. With the open 280, you almost run out of gas on the last maneuver. It gets a little risky, in fact. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to wind up putting the black air filter on as a compromise to finish out the day. But it has a much more pronounced 242 without the filter, but the penalty is in mileage. It's not much of a secret. A lot of these things are kind of common sense, but I always want to do this part of the test. There's many times I've come up with what I thought was a real good setup for a certain plane, really dialed in the way I liked it. I'd go out and practice. Get out to the field in the morning, the grass is soaking wet. The lines wouldn't be, I just wouldn't want to even take a chance that maybe they'd stick, or it's a little bit of rain. And if you go back and look at the video, you'll see we've done a lot of the testing we've done in really humid, crappy weather. Now what's happened is, I looked at the little Radio Shack thermometer, we're up to 45 degrees, so it's warming up. Now I'm hoping I can stay here. I hope the air doesn't go crazy. We only had one crazy air go through here already. I want to stay as long into the day as I can, possibly get a 10 or a 15 degree spread from early in the morning to late in the evening, and just see what if any tuning I need to do to the plane. Because I want to satisfy myself that I've done as much of the homework as I have to do here. And so many people take one flight with something and it's no good. Oh, I love it. If you spend a whole day and a whole gallon at the field, I think you know a little bit more than that. The one flight wonder. Either way, you don't want to make that decision. Well, this looks like about as bright as the sun is going to get today. Anyway, I've been going back and forth with the air filters, trying to determine which which is appropriate for today's conditions. When it's wide open, it really does get a little close on fuel, and I don't like to be on the razor edge. So what I've decided to do for today's conditions and for the rest of the test, just leave the black filter in, which is our medium tuning. Green, of course, most restrictive, wide open, most wide open, and most powerful. We're right in the middle for today's conditions, and by the way, it did go up to over 50 degrees. In fact, our little Radio Shack-O-meter says 52. It feels like it's 40 though, it still feels cold, but the only way to really be happy with this is try them all. And a lot of people that have watched all these tuned pipe tapes have told me they really weren't aware of how significant the restriction at the exhaust was. That's the biggest eye-opener. A couple of people that have just taken a rubber ducky off their pipe and put on a less restrictive one have been really impressed with the power gain. And I've noticed now, just Randy Smith's new pipe has the thing built right in at 415, so apparently he's come to the same conclusion too, and it's good that he's making them that way. And I'll be the first to admit, everything in stunt is some kind of a compromise. Many events, and again, it's like speed events and pilot, there are absolutes. Absolute top power, absolute something. The one thing in stunt is this constant array of trade-offs. You give a little, you get a little. Now with the bigger 280 wide open, wow, the motor run is astronomical. But the problem is it uses the fuel too quickly. And I don't want to resort to things like 7-ounce tanks. Because what happens when you do that, the beginning of the flight to the end of the flight, the CG change is so great. I've had ships with 7-ounce tanks, and it's really difficult to get any kind of consistent practice with them. Also, a good compromise in the case of you would like to wind up with, in my case, at the end of the day, the black filter. Because then when you get to the field, if it warms up, you can run it open. If it gets cold, you can put the green filter in. You're in the middle of your tuning range. You have two choices. It's like having the adjustable lead-outs in the middle of the range. And what point are adjustable lead-outs if you get to the field and you need them to go further back and they're already as far back as they go? It's pointless. Of course, every single time you change, and that air filter is such a significant thing. Every time you lessen the restriction at either end of the system, of course, the mileage gets worse. Now, I've gone from no filter to having a black filter. Now, what's going to happen is the motor now is going to have to be re-needled. I'm not going to be at 10.5 again because I put a restriction in there. I'm going to have to go in on a needle. So this is why, if you know this ahead of time, at least you have a real fighting chance at dialing in the kind of power that you want for your particular conditions. And obviously, if we were in Florida right now, it would be totally different. Little by little, we're getting through the gallon. I guess we're almost half through. But I've been able to do all the little experiments and little tests that I've wanted to do with this, almost all with this engine anyway. And unless somebody shows up at the field with another engine, I'm basically going to call this a good day of fuel testing. Again, all of the criteria, I wanted to have that flexibility of being able to use all the air filters. I also wanted to have the total output somewhere around the point where I could pull the braided lines in emergency. And I know this prop being the highest load of all the props, if it's spinning this prop and it's not sagging in a 2-cycle, I'm probably real close to having what I want. Again, it was pretty impressive with that Venturi wide open. It really was. It gets real throaty too, by the way. You get a real distinct break where it, like a 4-barrel carburetor cuts in. But anyway, playing with those air filters and with the restrictions, at the Stinger, that's another thing. If we really wanted to fool around with, we could fool around with that today. But I think we're just going to be real satisfied that we got this much done. Because it's, again, it's 50, you know, it's funny, it's 52 degrees, and probably in Florida 52 isn't bad, but up here it's muggy and cold. There's mud everywhere. Every time you step somewhere there's mud. My boots are... By the way, Karen told me to put this little tip on the video. I always get the car all muddied up with the boots from being at the field. She gave me a turkey pan left over from the turkey, and I just take my boots off before I get in the car, put it in the turkey pan. Kind of a nice little thing if you fly in these kind of conditions. I don't know how many people do. pretty representative of the flights we've been having, so George can get his lap times off of that and I can use it for a reference before we go on to the next part of the test. Looks like 53 degrees is going to be the max. We're not getting any warmer than that. No, last hour or so it hasn't been warmer at all. Anyway, but what did happen is we have held relatively consistent on the runs from whatever it was. I don't know if it was 40 or really if it was even colder. That little gizmo that I have to tell temperature, I don't know how accurate it is, but it always gives you a relative reading. So what I'm going to do now, I want to get one more flight on this. And I'm real satisfied the way this last flight was. So I'm going to really use this flight as my square one flight. And I want to change the pipe. I have a Randy Smith PA61 pipe that belongs to Rich Jacobone. And it's got a very big unrestricted end. And to me, the most significant thing about any pipe design, and I'm sure there's a counterpoint to this, the most significant thing is that the opening at the end of the pipe, and that it not be too restrictive. And so I guess we're going to find out. It won't really be a totally fair test for one reason, is it doesn't have a pressure fitting. It doesn't come with a pressure fitting. So I will really be compromising it, but I want to get a rough idea of where it's going to run, how loud it's going to be, what kind of fuel mileage I'll get, blankety blank blank. I would count this as one of the more successful days, even though we don't have any really good flyable air. It's definitely a couple of those outside loops earlier on in the day you can see are kind of crazy. But next thing I want to do, we wound up getting back to what we feel is a square one, got a flight on that. Next thing I want to do is I want to take George's pipe off. This is the GMA pipe with a 360 hole. And again, I've said this before, the new pipes, I believe, have a 380 hole in the back, but Rich has one of them, but he didn't leave it with me, so again, we can do a little more testing. Anytime you can open up the back of that pipe and get it unrestricted, you know, very predictable things happen. More power, more noise, more 2.4 run. The more you can open that up. I feel that's the way that's whole. Now, in the very beginning of the tune pipe that I saw and commercially available, the little holes in the back of them were really making the engines overheat. They were very restrictive. Part of what was really difficult for a lot of people that aren't very savvy to motor runs to figure out. As those holes get bigger and bigger in the back, and again, in my own way, I've not been a believer in the pinhole in the pipe and that the whole thing goes crazy. I haven't found that to be true. In fact, I've opened up the pipes with 1/8-inch holes just to see if it would make any difference. No difference at all. Anyway, the thing that's going to be wrong here is we can't run this with pipe pressure. So we're just going to get a couple of runs, and maybe I'll ask Rich if he doesn't mind, I'll put a pressure fitting in his pipe. This is his pipe, Rich Jacobone's pipe. Now we've gone through, looks like a little more than a half a gallon of fuel. And usually I can tell by how much oil is on the back. There's definitely enough oil in this fuel. That's one of the concerns most people have, is they don't want to be thinking that they have enough oil and in essence not have enough oil. These motors are very expensive, hard to get tuned to exactly the way you want them. And when you do, you hate to lose it. Anyway, let me take this pipe out, get the other pipe in. This is usually a 5-minute operation. I like to clean things up a little before I start it, so that I have as valid of a test as possible. You can see there's plenty of, not much stays on a plane, but there definitely is some castor oil in that fuel. This little stinger end, this little gizmo here for the last, the last 20 gallons of fuel. And I've made major gains by not having that real restrictive rubber duck. Again, I noticed Randy's pipe has it built right in. Now, one of the things we could try, we could seal the back of this off and put a little piece of epoxy. We have the high temperature epoxy, of course. Again, I put 2 pressure fittings in this pipe before because what I wanted to test was I wanted to be able to do this right in the middle of a bunch of runs, is just leave this wide open. Now that's a hole in the pipe. Nothing changed at all, not on this one anyway. So whatever information that's worth, I've heard so much written about these pinholes. I really wanted to see a major change or something dramatic happen. Never happened, but we've had real good luck. Now this pipe has probably a little over 22 gallons of fuel on it, and I've heard people say that pipes don't last forever. Well, 22 gallons, I don't know. This one looks like it's holding up pretty well. Again, we'll find out as soon as we do have some kind of failure. This is a modification I made so that the pipe has a little bend in it to get it around the wing. The way I never got the header that really belongs in the plane. These pipes are not made out of total carbon fiber. If you take and look real close, you can see every other strand is glass. Every other one is e-glass, probably e-glass or Kevlar. It's hard, and it's insignificant. When you look inside though, you can see light coming through. It's kind of eerie. Anyway, the difference in this pipe is it's a significant different amount of volume in the back part of the pipe. Now what's always interesting is whenever you restrict an engine in one way, usually very predictable things happen. The fuel mileage, it runs forever, it runs longer. As you unrestrict it and let it flow, and this is the biggest of the stingers, this is a 415 ID. So I'm really thinking, even though we can't do pressure today, we'll get the pressure test done later. It'll be an interesting test. We can get, hey, I still have plenty of fuel left. Just get an idea of just how these runs are working out, and if, because we're going to be making our own pipes real soon. In fact, Jimmy was working on our mandrels yesterday night when I left the shop. What'll be an interesting test is just to see just how different they are. Another thing too, what usually happens in the world of motorcycling, the constant section part of the pipe. In this case, the constant section is roughly between my 2 fingers, where it doesn't change diameter. This is what usually will give a pipe the maximum flexibility. A speed pipe would have none of this. It would immediately go into a divergent cone. So it's this section right in here that gives the pipe its friendly nature. And of course the fact that it doesn't restrict and choke the engine like those early pipes with the little 300 holes used to do. What I do is leave the motor set exactly how it was, except we're going to take into account, obviously we're going to have to open the needle valve because we don't have a pressure fitting in a pipe as of today's test, but be able to get some ballpark feel for this pipe. Well, I think one thing is worth mentioning before we do our puttering around here. Pipe run is significantly different on or off pressure. You can't assume that it's going to be the same. Usually, and in my case, the needle usually starts being open a half a turn more. And it's fair to say that all the pipes we've tested, Randy's, Brian Ether's, George's, my own, Midgley's, all of the pipes that are made commercially now are made really well. And it's only a question of which one you like. I don't think there's one pipe that is significantly more powerful or less powerful, or they all have kind of zeroed in on the same numbers after all these years. The critical thing was not to restrict it, not to get those little tiny tail openings, not to make the pipe physically too small. In motorcycle racing, if you go back and look at Yamaha or Suzuki or any of them, the pipes get bigger every year by some amount in the time that they were developing 2-cycle engines. And once you have a lot of power, then you can spread it around and make it friendly. But you can't start with an engine that's overly restricted. If you take any pipe, even this pipe, and we put a 300 restriction in the end, gonna have a heat problem on hot days, if nothing else. At least that's what I've found. And maybe I've missed part of this, but I don't think I've missed too much. Now, usually what'll happen, I have to get this needle off, and it's cold in here. Usually when it's cold and I haven't run the engine for a while, a couple of drops of lighter fluid will kick it right off. May not even need it, just needs to be choked. Remember, we're not on pipe pressure now. The pipe pressure usually
pre-feeds the engine some fuel. In fact, when you see the engine start, a lot of times you hear it spooling up. It'll start off slow and then catch. It's usually because the pipe pressure is cleaning all that fuel out, and it's rich in the initial setting from all the fuel that's in the fuel system and in the air filter. These pipe power blast fuel.
Now, a couple of things are very apparent. Pipe is just a tad louder. In fact, loud is not the right word. It's got a throatier note than George's pipe. Part of that is because, all of it is because of the big Stinger ID. And what's happening is that it's a funny angle that Stinger sticks down. It almost sticks straight down, and it throws a funny smoke trail. But keep in mind, that wouldn't be typical of a plane that you built for a pipe. This one, the pipe kind of hangs out, and it's at a very awkward angle. And the smoke, rather than presenting a flat stream behind the plane, is kind of a choppy action. Now, I'm not going to butcher this pipe up because it's Rich Jacobon's pipe, but were it my pipe, I would shorten that Stinger maybe half an inch, put an angle on it, and that would take care of that. Beautiful run. Very similar in power, very similar in mileage to George's pipe. A little bit throatier note, and again, because it's Rich Jacobon's, we're not going to butcher it all up on them. Yeah, we're about 2/3 through with that gallon of fuel, and it looks like the day is wearing on relatively nicely. It's warmed up a little more. It's 55 right now. Oh, good. And this is the only thing I can do without butchering up the pipe on Rich. I shortened the pipe a half an inch. And what I'm able to do is, because it's a little bit smaller diameter, a little shorter length, I have that half inch of length inside the coupler that I can play with before I cut it. But by shortening it a little bit, usually that'll give you a power boost. And I just want to see if we're on the verge of having a real good power boost. The run characteristics are excellent. Tone is, actually, to tell you the truth, I like the sound of a throatier engine. This would be a lot more like a traditional engine sound. I kind of like that, but I have a feeling some people wouldn't. And there's so many prejudices in this hobby, people liking this and liking that. And you're stupid if you like this and stupid if you like that. When you have to deal with that, you have to kind of walk that middle road. You really can't be too different than everybody else. It was funny, we had a time, and I remember when they were decibel reading planes back in the early 90s. Everybody had a decibel meter. Oh, let's decibel read. And we went over, and some of the planes that we thought were the quietest were reading 94, 95. And some of the ones that were throaty, very similar to this in fact, some of those, they were in the high 80s. So I guess it's kind of like in the eye of the beholder. But anyway, I want to get a couple more flights on this. How are we doing on the fuel? Probably got about 5 flights left in there. And while we have this air, I'm trying to take advantage of it. didn't seem to make a whole lot of difference. Anyway, what I want to do now, we're at the end of the day here. I want to basically thank Power Blast for a good product. I think we're going to be able to use that, and it certainly looks like Randy Smith's pipe is usable on the jet. And hey, we have a whole lot of testing left to do. It's been a good day, and we'll see you back to shop. This is Karen's tip, and it's a good one. Turkey pan for your boots when you get in the car so you don't get it all slime boiled up. Good tip. Hey, it's been a good day. I'm freezing. Woo! Cold. Now I'm finally back to the shop where we have some heat, hot coffee, maybe even a pizza. Now today, with the little time I have left in the shop, what I want to do, one of the things I always wanted to try on this motor, I've never had a sealed front bearing. Now on some motors, the Tiger 60 is one example of a motor that responds real well to a sealed front bearing. And I have done that change many times, gone from unsealed to sealed right at the field. In fact, on a Tiger, you can take the little seal out of the sealed bearing and put it right in the unsealed bearing. You don't even have to take the motor out of the plane. This one we can't. The bearings are not a quick swap like that. So what I'm going to do, obviously, is pull the motor out. Now, I've been testing this pipe the last couple of days, having some real good luck with Randy's 61 pipe. It fits the characteristics of the jet very well, especially this combination that we have in here. I've also done I made up a little extension so I could lengthen and shorten and maneuver it around right at the field several different times at several different lengths. You know what I just noticed? Funny, I didn't ever saw this at the field. The wheels are getting oil soaked. They're like sponges from being in that puddle of oil that we slosh around in out there. Anyway, cowling looks like it's holding up real well. And so I'm going to do whenever I have to do this kind of a job, I try to schedule as much periodic maintenance as possible. In this case, I would want to see if the couplers are holding up well. Anything inside that looks like it's deteriorating, cowl hold down bolts, any little oil leaks that might be on the back of the engine. It's a good time, and it's a good day actually, to get all the maintenance done on this and get ready for a nice weekend of flying if we have any weather. Mark the gallon. Let's get this hat off here. I always mark the gallon of fuel the last day that I was out testing and playing and fooling around. I ran about a gallon and, I don't know, maybe a gallon and a quarter. But I'm into gallon 2 at a PowerMaster already. And I assume if I would have had any problem with it by now, it would have already surfaced. So far, that's been a real pleasant surprise, having a good replacement for Taffender fuel. If I do have some time, I have a little idea of what I can do to organize my tune pipe spare parts box a little better. We're building up such a collection of props and venturis and different things that we want to always have at the field, including, all the little paraphernalia, the zip ties and tools. I have an idea in my mind. If I get this bearing swapped out ahead of time, I'm going to try to make a little better organization out of this box. This box is growing like a monster. I just love being able to just pull this out in one piece, just like this. And currently, that's how we've been running the motor, with a 280 spigot venturi. We've had a black air filter on, green air filter, black air. These change momentarily, and this is a good way. We've been fine-tuning it now. I always, when I have the motor apart, I like to clean off all of the extra, if there's any. It looks like we're having a little bit of a leak up here, and I'll address that later on, and maybe just replace the coupler. These couplers really do last. People have told me they don't last that long. These have lasted longer than I thought they would. But obviously, many of these things don't last forever. But this engine has 23.5 gallons of fuel through it now. And so far, this is going to be the first change. And the only reason we're changing it, keep in mind, this bearing is not worn out at all. It's not a wear and it's not a performance thing. I just want to see for my own satisfaction, and it'll help George in making the evaluation too. Now some motors, when you change the front bearing, nothing happens. I've had Tigers that they changed dramatically. I've had some motors that I changed their front bearing into a seal bearing. There's no appreciable difference. And some motors come sealed, some come unsealed. The reason we're going to do this is for our own personal knowledge. We're trying to get the development program as accurate as possible and try as many things as possible and not eliminate anything just for our own personal prejudices. So, the motor has held up very, very well. It's really been a bulletproof motor. Now, part of my maintenance routine is whenever I have a motor out of a plane, I'm going to do any other work on it, I always make sure the screws are all torqued. I don't have a loose one, because remember, we do change this gasket relatively often. I've had this head off a lot of times. I'm always looking to see if there's a header leak. In this case, this looks pretty good. This looks within the usable range, that's for sure. And because we're going to have to take the motor apart, there's no point checking the back plate right now. Set this up so that I can pinch off the needle, put some air pressure in here, and I can see if any leaks are coming out the front. In this case, I just did that test and it looks fine. So we're not replacing a bearing that's leaking, and that's important to know right away. But see, you never do know under the temperature that the motor operates at. It may expand. That's the part of it I don't know, and that's the part of it that we'll find out when we do this. If you have a motor and you seal this off, you can pinch the needle, you do it however you want. Of the crankshaft and so that the port isn't exposed, and all of a sudden you see bubbles coming out of here, you know you have a problem. This is the old plumber's trick, and I'm just taking just a very few drops of Windex. This will usually leave, because of course it's not an airtight seal. I don't know if you can see that on camera. And obviously it can't be a solid sealed surface. But that right now gives us an indication now of where we're starting from. We know now that the leakage that we have in the front is at the acceptable limit, or a limit that I consider normal anyway. This cone is just a snap off, and as I'm going through, I'm looking for anything that looks like it might be something that needs maintenance while I have this apart. Remember, this motor has quite a bit of fuel. I mean, you could do the math if you want. A 6-ounce tank, and in the beginning we had about 10 gallons with a 5-ounce tank. It's a lot of flights. Nice features of this motor that I like is the fact I don't have to drill out all my props oversize. And this is a replaceable stud should you ever have to replace. Have a crash into the side of a battleship or something. You don't wind up damaging the crankshaft. You just need to replace a little stud that's probably only $1 or $2. I take a motor apart. I like to put a little scratch on parts. And this is just for my own reference. I like to have a little scratch. So when I put it back together, I'm putting it back together the same way. Since I haven't had this engine apart before, I didn't realize there's a relief here, so you really can't put this on backwards. But it never hurts when you're taking something apart. Makes a little identifying scratch. Now, I checked the head bolts tight before realizing I was going to take the motor apart anyway. Anyway, it won't really matter. Always a good idea to loosen them the complete opposite of putting it back together. Going opposite corners. Again, one of the only parts we've had fail so far is glow plugs, of all things. The modern button head design. Sleeve has a little identifying notch in the back that needs to get lined up when this gets put back together with the back bolt. You can get a little idea of the burn pattern on the sleeve. Of course, this is exposed inside the case. On the pylon motor, that whole piece would be open. I always put a little X on the back of the rod, so I know that side faces the back when I put it back together. It slips out, by the way, at top dead center. all I'm trying to do. I'm not doing any polishing. I'm just removing the carbon that's built up from the castor oil. Being careful not to score anything. But it is a macho crankshaft. Wow. I have never had the motor apart yet, but that's a serious crankshaft right there. Wow. Now, I've been told by several people that these bearings that are in the jets are, in fact, Larry Scarinzi's one of the one that told me, these are really the state-of-the-art high-quality bearings. Now, I don't know about the seal bearing we're replacing for this test, but obviously we're not going to throw the other bearing away. We'll keep that in our inventory as a spare part. Now, we need to get a dowel or something soft to tap that bearing out with. I'm trying to make a little bearing, but I don't want to force it. I don't have the right size dowel, but you could always cut up a piece of motor mount. This out, I had to put a little bit of heat on the case, just a little bit. And I'm trying to tap it evenly from all sides. Oop. But that's hot. Woo! Now, obviously you don't want to melt the venturi or anything while you do this. Now I want to let this, get over there. I want to let that bearing cool down. Here's the sealed bearing. It's sealed on both sides. Obviously we're not going to be able to put it in with the seal on both sides. We're going to take the seal off that faces the motor. Truth is, see, I already tried this. I know that's not a good fit. Not a fit at all, in fact. This is a totally different bearing. And believe it or not, this is a much higher quality bearing. But I want to show something up close here. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this on the... You can look right through the bearing. See where the race is? And that little piece that holds the balls apart? This is a very low friction, very, very high quality bearing. These are very expensive, by the way. As opposed to, these are less expensive, but for stunt, it might be that we've got some kind of gain. Again, we won't know until we try it. This is the kind of stuff that a lot of people don't want to do the homework, don't want to do the time. And by the way, we'll have an extra seal when we're done with this. And this bearing you cannot look through at all. So again, we'll find out. It'll be a very interesting part of the test. And part of doing this kind of a job, make sure you have plenty of coffee. Everybody knows I get up early and stay up late, and this is, ask John Brodak, this is the key to getting a good motor job. You need a lot of coffee. And no decaf either, real coffee. Again, if this doesn't want to go in real easily, a little bit of heat with the propane torch, it should drop right in. Now George told me a good trick. You can also just put the crankshaft in and tighten the nut, and that'll tighten it too. But I want to get this in before, I want to do it, I'm going to heat this with the propane torch a bit too. I want that to sit in real nice. I'm not suggesting that that anybody do their own engine work if you're not comfortable doing it, but if you are, and I for one, I enjoy watching people work on engines, Tom Hampshire for one. I'm wondering what that little S on the crankshaft means. Is that an S or a 9? I can't tell. 8? S? Probably means pick up the phone. And you can look at the piston and see the cutout on the intake side of the engine. So we really didn't need the X, but I always feel it's cheap insurance when you're taking an engine apart for the first time. Inspect the circlips, make sure the circlips don't look like they're not in good shape. In this case, they look perfect. Now you want to always put the rod on at top dead center. If possible, you want to, oops. So I'm trying to do this looking through the camera lens, a little difficult. Now that little detent lines up with the back screw. These motors have such a nice tight pinch at the top of the stroke, so if I were to turn this without holding my finger there, that liner will come right out. See that? All modern ABCs have some kind of a pinch at the top, but I think the Jet is the king of pinch at the top, of the ones I've seen anyway. What's nice is the maintenance on these engines is totally straightforward. There's nothing sneaky or crazy. You don't even need any special tools except a dowel to redo it. But they need so little maintenance, and it'd be foolish not to send the engine off to George if you have one. And there was something you wanted to do and you weren't real familiar with it. It really isn't an appropriate engine to practice on, but since my long illustrious career of ripping motorcycles apart, I felt I'd give this a shot, and it's been a very straightforward, easy to follow. I don't even think you need an instruction manual if you have this video. In this type of a button head design, the head itself actually acts as a clamp to hold the button, which contains the little combustion chamber too, in place. It's a real modern design. This is the way most modern motors are made. Possibly the most important single thing that most people will do, torquing the head screws, just like on a car. Always make sure the wrench is sharp, and I'll explain what I'm saying, because you don't want to put a round off the screws. Usually the wrench will round off before the screws. These obviously are high quality screws. And I have stripped many a bolt over tightening. It's better to just go back and forth, both taking it apart and putting it together. Now before I put the back plate on, I want to put a couple of drops of WD-40 down in the motor, just to keep things on the first fire up, make sure there's no dry surfaces. We used to put motorcycle engines together. What we used to use is STP. I don't have any STP anymore. We just wipe all the bearing surfaces with STP. Now you don't want to flood the engine with oil either, because on the first time it starts up, you'll have yourself a mess, believe me. It probably won't start right up anyway. It'll be smoking and everything. If we had put this on the wrong way, we'd know about it right away. That relief obviously is for the piston.
And be kind. When she smiles, she can make you believe it's a beautiful.
Now a couple other little tips. Never take the header off unless you absolutely have to. Disturbing that joint is like an invitation for it to leak. Unless you have to replace the header for some reason, no matter what, leave those screws and keep them torqued down. This is only the second gasket's been on it because we broke the first header, but that's lasted the test of time. And what I meant to say is these wrenches, what happens, you can see they get rounded off at the end, so I just grind that little bit on a grindstone very, very slowly and dip them in water so that you don't detemper the steel. You don't want to get the wrench any hotter than you have to grind that away. You can sharpen the wrenches up. Obviously that's one of the nice things. Keep nice sharp wrenches and you don't strip out or round off any of the little things in the bolts. Oh, how much, this really isn't a valid test. This is really just to get a comparison of how much leakage there is now. There's still a very slight leakage. It might be less, it might be the same, but it doesn't matter, because what matters is how much does it leak under motor operating temperature. We don't care when the motor's cold if it leaks. So anyway, I'm going to put this back together, get it back in the plane. That was a nice motor to take apart. Goes together, comes apart very easily, no special tools. I like to look for something that looks like it may not be working as well as we like. Clean everything up before I put it back together. Boy, these cowl things are terrible. Anyway, the Brodac dope is held up to perfection. Talk about fuel proof. If this back end of this doesn't get fuel proofed, forget about it. You turn the plane into a sponge. And our cowl mount modification, at least it looks like it's working so far anyway. Now, obviously I'll clean the filter, clean all the parts as I put them back together. Be putting on Rich Jacobone's GMA pipe. And the first thing is always roughen up the pipe where the rubber parts are going to connect. Put that little rough edge, some threads if you will. Don't try to... Now this is one that doesn't have the back end opened up yet, but I'm going to have another one with a big opening in the back soon. George is sending me one. So this will be a good place to start our next day of flying, our next day of testing, whatever you want to call it. Because we do have some pipe testing to do, and I want to have these all set so they're interchangeable right at the field. Anyway, it's good to see him back in action. Some weather or some daylight or something. Best thing tonight would be nice would be to get all this crap organized, and I think I have an idea that'll work. I'll find out in about 5 minutes. The whole thing starts with, this is my little cushion for laying a plane in while I do maintenance, and I want to have a box that fits in here because I don't like to make any extra trips back and forth to the car, and I can pick this all up in one shot. So the idea is to get all things organized into one box that'll conveniently fit right in the middle of that. The box, which has always been the box we use, fits right in there. But the problem is everything is so disorganized. These plastic bags all get oil soaked and wrinkled and everything. So I had this little idea. Now you can go down, and I know everybody that flies stunt loves this word free. There is, you know, when you come down, there isn't a thriftier group of people on the face of the earth than stunt flies. What you do is you go down and get them for free. And what I want to, obviously, the people that are subscribing to the tapes already know about this. They get tapes. All you lucky people getting tapes every day. Anyway, now what I wanted to do is cut the end off of this, and I thought I could make little compartments. Because there's so much stuff, when you have to go look for a Venturi or for some kind of a zip tie or something, you'd like to have all the zip ties in one package if possible. So I thought I could make little, now I'll tape these, make little compartments that I could use instead of these plastic bags. Keep one box for all the things that relate to zip ties, so that when I need a zip tie I can take that package out and I have a package of zip ties. I have this very inconvenient oily greasy bag. Let me just dump this, and everything that used to be in this really was not a, you know, it was like a makeshift thing, but now I'm going to graduate up to having nice little, and these are free by the way. Well, I know people will love that. Thinking you look around and you say, oh geez, he's got 1,000 zip ties there. No, I really don't. I got 2,000. Because I bought 2 packs already of 500 each. You can get these wholesale, by the way, and they're a lot cheaper than buying them in Home Depot. A couple other things, there's different grades of zip ties. Some of these are really cheesy. In fact, that's probably somebody on the phone asking to buy a dozen zip ties. Let me get the phone. Good thing, these are all my little pipe extensions. Well, instead of having a sloppy bag and running all over the place, I assume I only have a half hour left in the day. I assume within a half hour I can organize this whole thing. And maybe it's a good idea you can organize even stuff in your shop with these boxes. They really are nice. What I try to do is be systematic about it. Anything that would go with lengthening or shortening the pipe. This box would be all my stuff for lengthening and shortening the pipe. Tubing cutter for cutting the aluminum. Get rid of that. All the little pieces of carbon, aluminum. And you think when you start doing tune pipes, you think, oh, you're only going to need 1 of these and 2 of these. And
At the end of a year, you look and your box is a foot deep, and there's still stuff you can run out of. And I found that out many days. I'd leave one box home, and sure, it's unbelievable. That's the part you need. Rubber ends, rubber couplers. Again, it all makes sense. In fact, now while I'm going through this, I see somebody was probably me, by the way, putting zip ties in here. Well, now I can get it organized. Boy, I hate getting to the field and having to do this. This just makes me wild. It's funny, in the 90s, I bought like 5 of these rubber connectors at a time. Then I started buying a dozen. Then I looked around to buy them wholesale. I haven't bought any in a while, but I've got about 100 of them. On today's mail, I got a real nice letter from Johnny O, our friend from Middlesex, our flying partner. And I had seen these in the store. I never bought one though. These are these disposable, and I guess you break the end off. I'm not going to do it now. I see he's been using this one though. But anyway, and he sent down some tape. Scotch brand safe release. Well, as soon as we get to doing some painting, Johnny, we're going to definitely check it out. I know you've been watching and enjoying all the videos. Keep watching them. Keep sending stuff. Anyway, we'll give this will be great for mugging people. Anyway, in today's mail. And a couple of quick shots here from Rory Tennyson of his Air Force. I'm not sure I can identify many of the planes, but it certainly looks like he's chopped down some balsa wood in his time. And I got a nice Christmas card from, boy, the Christmas cards this year. About 1,000 Christmas cards already. Yeah, it looks like mainly he likes RC, but hey, I like everything. Wish we could just not have to sleep at night so you could build more models. Thanks a lot, Rory. Hey, we appreciate it. And have a good Christmas, everybody. Knows my Air Force is all over Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, a couple of them in Connecticut. I don't even know. So one's in Texas. The Tavio's got one in Texas. So got in today's mail some real nice stuff from John Pothier over the Christmas present. Look at this punch. Now I know he said he always wanted to punch me out. And some other little goody modeling. Toothpicks, hey. He knows I always need toothpicks and a little present for Wendy and Karen, but Karen's busy upstairs cooking, so we'll take this up later. Hey John, you're an okay guy. One final thing before we end this part. Take a real close look at the workmanship on these. Take a look at the finish first of all. These are made by a Pampa member, John Gajewski. I'm gonna mention he was Jimmy Carter's personal fishing guide in Montana, and he makes these custom nets. Now I purchased these two for a good friend of mine who's a fisherman for a Christmas present. And what happened is I asked him for one, and John graciously gave me two. Now I want to give John the full credit for one of the things he adds to our little business enterprise. He does all the motor mount cutting of the hardwood, and he has a business. We're going to try to get over there and take some video of his business. I got to get the phone. He has a unique shop. Before I had to talk to President Nixon. This is a real important thing. Now, there's a concept here that I'd like to convey to people. And by the way, look how nice that is. Each one is signed. Fish the USA way, obviously. These are made in the cellar of his house. And if you saw some of the equipment, I really didn't have the video camera down there the last time I was there. These are all handmade, and he doesn't, it's unbelievable. That's all I can say is we're going to get down there with video soon. Check this out. He sent me two of them. My friend Joe Carabello, of course, who's the master fisherman. This year alone, he was in Russia, Montana, Missouri, 4 or 5 other tournaments that he goes to. He's absolutely like the Paul Walker of fishing, I guess, or the whatever, I don't know. Anyway, this is John's address. If anybody is into fishing, and I can think of a few people right off the top of my head that might want a net. What a great Christmas present. And John is cutting us up another batch of great motor mounts.
There's no other source I know of for straight motor mount wood, so I hope, John, as always, that you do a great job. John Gajewski, he's judged many local contests. He has 2 Cardinal kits underway. Can't say enough about the guy, and he makes a great fishing net, too. And Mike Kajeski is busy making the shelves for our Brodak dope supply here. It has been an extremely pleasant experience using this material, and I hope, one thing, that anybody that does run into a problem, any kind of problem, that they'll please contact me. Let me try to help them resolve it, and we can add our little, I don't know what you would even call it, our little technology or whatever. Randolph is certainly willing to work with us on any problem that may come up. I don't anticipate any. In fact, I've been having such good luck. I'm getting a little frisky with this stuff. I've been using it for doing molds. I've been using it for the Spitfire. I used it to repair Strega. Bill Mazzoni's finished a bunch of planes with it already. Frank McMillan's already almost finished with one. And I'm just guessing within a year we're going to really have something that's a major improvement for the enjoyment of all the people that model these things. And special thanks to John Brodak, of course. We're out here and we got several planes to try to fuel in. This is the second part of our fuel test. We know it works fine in a jet. We have one of I guess every engine around here. First is going to be a Super Tiger 60 that we're really happy with the way this has been running, so this should be pretty. Oh, don't go by the label, Larry.
They should.
That's bleach.
They should make that more pronounced.
Okay.
You can see it.
You have the needle set from the last time we flew this, so just put the fuel in and let's see how the Tiger 60 responds to this fuel.
You're on TV, Larry, coast to coast. You're going to be famous now.
Now, our resident engine expert, Tom Hampshire, resident coffee purchaser, Larry Scarenzi. Notice all the high-quality tools we have for doing this fuel test. Oh, man. All right, Mikey.
Except Larry lost his prop wrench today.
Oh, God. So everybody, conditions 40 degrees, 47% humidity.
Add 4 to that. That's off by 4.
Ah, buy a new one. Buy a new one.
Can't afford it. Social Security.
Come on, you don't need Social Security. I'm going to get a new one. Mine is worn out, too. Now, always important to make sure that the fuel is going to be consistent in terms of what we're used to from Carpenter fuel. Most of the people in the club, I hope it's only a matter of time. We had a break point. Now, we haven't re-needled this to get a reference point. It was 43 degrees last time we flew, and it's 40 now. Break point seems the same. We'll see what the mileage is the same on a Tiger. This is a tongue muffler Tiger 60, a big Jim Hemi 60. So if this is a good indication of a middle of the road, what people would expect from Tiger 60s. Now we have some other engines here. We're going to try this in one of Larry's combat jobs. We have a Fox 35 ship here. We try to represent one of every kind of ship that normally we would be using, just to see if anything is going. Even a Fox, I'd like to be able to know if we can get through. I know they make Fox fuel with more oil, but what you know is going to happen is somebody in the club is not going to have that fuel. They're going to buy the wrong fuel, so we want to see. Because I know that if you use some of the RC blends that have no oil, you can ruin a Fox. I'm sure there's enough caster in this fuel from having seen how you have to wipe the plane off at the end of a flight. Now it's good and cold here. I feel chilly anyway. Mike's out there in a t-shirt. He's probably freezing. Anyway, it looks like the Tiger 60 part of this test is in the bank. Get a couple of runs on the jet, but there's people flying on the other circle. It's going to be hard to get the camera unless they leave early. We won't get anything meaningful out of this until we can get up here and we're the only one at the field. But we know the fuel runs fine in the jet. That one's in the bank. is this, a Fox 35?
This is a stock one, Windy. This airplane
Totally
usually-
stock muffler even.
Yeah. Muffler is not back drilled. This one usually gets this airplane usually gets a Fox with a bypass stuffed. This one isn't because it wanted some nose weight. This is the only engine I had with muffler lugs.
Okay.
So we shall see. Obviously,
The key here is this fuel going to have enough oil in it that you don't fry a Fox?
Right.
Like, we know when Andy brought his little Fox out and had that pink fuel, the no oil special, half a run, and he ate an engine.
Windy, I put that.
So that's all I
put a
want to know.
bushing in that for Andy.
Yep. That's a one-flight engine then.
That thing, boy, he hurt that thing. Whatever that pink junk was, it hurt.
The no oil, RC
boy,
pink,
the
no oil
Both
fuel.
ends of the rod, the wrist
Rod
pin
was
had
shot.
aluminum on it. The piston and cylinder set.
Come on, pump. So the test here is if you were going to use 28% caster, that's another thing. I want to know that you could fly a flight and not hurt the engine.
Yeah,
That's the test.
this one is loose enough that we probably couldn't hurt it even with cruel power.
Turned it in, it's thinner.
Yeah, it sounds rich to me. He's got to try it again. A little on the rich side. This is Larry's ship. How old is this ship? This has a double star in it. We'll find out if this is going to run in a double star. Double star 40. Find out if it runs in a McCoy 35 too. One of the prime motors that I'm sure nobody else is using in the club except Tom. McCoy 35. Now Tom had a rich run on the first run. He wanted to go in on a needle and try it again, but he's got some crazy tank system here. I don't know if I like this tank system. I don't know if he likes it. But we want to see if it's going to hurt a Fox. Even, I doubt if it will, but boy, we have had some bad experience, especially with new people in a hobby. They go to a hobby shop, they buy this $7 a gallon fuel. It has no oil in it. Oh man, I wonder what that stuff costs wholesale. Holy mackerel. Well, we're kind of finished with what we hope is the better part of 2 gallons of testing this fuel. Mike's taking some flights on Strega. Larry wants to take a few. Seems like everybody likes to fly the jet engine. I don't know why. I don't know what there is about it. We get a lot of free offers. Let me fly it. I don't know. We've been having a good time. We're out here freezing, but believe me, we're having a good time. And we've learned a lot. The fuel is definitely going to work for us. You can hear the motor run with the jet is just exactly the same as it was before, and that's the critical thing. That we haven't gone out of range on any of the motors. But be aware, boy, if there's one thing I want to make sure everybody knows, and I don't care if they label me the bad guy for saying it, that RC fuel, it has no oil in it, or it has Crisco or something in it. We have had many, many club members ruin expensive motors, inexpensive motors. Do not think that's a good way to save money. That is really a bad choice. Anyway, everybody gets to fly Strega. End the day with Larry breaking the prop on Strega. Good old Larry. There goes my good George Aldrich GMA prop. Anyway, good to know the fuel testing is complete. He better back up. He's close to the table. How close is he to the table, Mike? Back up, Larry!
line! Back up!
See this, George? He's drunk. See this, George? Unbelievable. Anyway. Tom, does he know about solids? You just can't do 30 round loops without straightening them out? He doesn't know. He's going to have line twists in this thing. You wait and see. Tom, yell out to him. You have to do equal insides and outsides. Maybe he knows. Nah. If he starts doing more round loops, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. Oh, no, he knows. Okay. Anyway, one of the things on my agenda is to get over to Larry's house in the next couple of weeks, and he's got an invitation to go videotape the Blue Angel and the Trident and the who knows what else. He's probably got something over there worth videotaping. The breakpoint seem about right, Tom? Yeah. Larry Scarinzi, the thrifty one. I get home from work and look, she's wrapping Christmas presents. Now you may think, that's my shop. You may think these are presents for me. No, they're for one of the poor people in town that Karen does her little charity work every year. Look at this. Anyway, even her daughter takes one of the, what are they, the poor families in town? I don't even know.
Yes.
And they buy the kids.
Stacy and Rob took the family.
They buy the family all presents.
All the gifts for the children.
Toys. And she does.
And we took a family.
And we took, what family did we take?
I'm not telling you. Anonymous.
Anonymous, yeah. Well, that's okay.
Very poor.
Look at my shop.
Very poor.
I'm supposed to be high tech here. What are you doing to me? Anyway, Merry Christmas to everybody. Hey, hope you get this tape before Christmas. Who knows? You never can tell. My poor shop. My shop. My shop. Seriously, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to everybody. All my friends, all the people subscribe to the tapes, all the people that don't, hey. We really do have a special relationship through the video, the medium of video. Special way to share the hobby. Actually, a special way to share the life that we have. So, having said that, Happy New Year, Merry Christmas. Adopt a family of your own for Christmas. In fact, if you want to, you can adopt me. And Power Blast fuel, I guess from this point on, will be the fuel that we'll be using in war, since we don't have any other fuel. Just like I said before, at all costs, avoid the fuel that has no oil. Boy. Is this a good time to be alive or what? Anyway, hope we'll see you on the next tape. Please share all the tapes with your friends. Have a great holiday. On this building, the world of stunt. What a great time to be alive. remember when you were a kid and had Lionel trains? Now, come on. Everybody had Lionel trains when they were a kid. Again, to all the people that subscribe to the tapes and all my friends, a very happy holiday, happy New Year, happy Lionel trains. And hey, Spitfires are coming. Well underway. They are coming.